welcome. It's time once again for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana, 104.5 FM and UPTV. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I'm here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. Views expressed are those of the speakers, and they are not intended to represent WRFU, UC, IMC, or the Urbana Socialist Forum. These views are our own, and by our in this instance, I mean myself and my charming guest who will introduce herself now.
I'm Mugiko from Japan. I'm also the host of the Harukana show on Friday on WRFQ.
That's good. Thank you for coming to the show. Are you studying something particular right now?
Yes, I teach anthropology at Kona University, Kobe in Japan. I'm on holiday and I came here for my research on community activity and media.
Community activity and media. Right. So that brings us, well, your topics and ours. Our topics coincide for this show.
Yes, it's very interesting. The Immigration Forum has a radio show from the community.
And a TV show.
Oh yes, the show, yes.
UPTV. So we're involved in community activities and grassroots activities and things like that. That fits nicely in what CU Immigration Forum does, and is because we are a grassroots organization. We were literally invented from the ground up. A lot of so-called grassroots organizations are really put together by entities. Someone decides, okay, we need to sort of make it seem like people are interested in this, so let's invent a grassroots organization. And we'll call it People for Justice or something like that. And it'll actually be some group's idea of a way to give the veneer of authenticity to their activities. But in the case of CU Immigration Forum, anyway, literally we're invented from the ground up. It's just people on the ground doing things about immigration who got together and decided, let's get together and share information. And from then we grew into who we are today. So I think we're a good example of that kind of organizing.
So the Immigration Forum starts spontaneously. People's ideas, issues, and indeed things they will go through in their lives.
Yeah. I think grassroots activities tend to come out of multiple people identifying a need. It's not really a grassroots activity if a single person says, well, we need this, and then they get people to help them try to advocate for that. That's not exactly, it may be a community activity or something, or may become a community activity. But grassroots generally, at least in my interpretation, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is where it just sort of arises from a number of people deciding that something needs to be done, and then they just decide, well, let's get together and do it, and that's how it happens. I think that's what I think of it anyway when I think of grassroots, and that's my own interpretation. I doubt if you'd find that in a dictionary or anything, but it seems different when a single person decides to do something versus when multiple people decide to do it.
Yes, the grassroots activity is like that. But Immigration Forum is one organization or forum. It isn't easy to understand from the name.
Yeah. It's kind of a misleading name, and we actually discussed this at one point. I don't know if you were around back when we were doing this, but one of our then volunteers and an AmeriCorps person named Francisco, who was working with us at the time, brought up the fact he thought the name was misleading because of the word forum. The name came about originally because it was literally a forum in the beginning. It was a meeting of people who worked on immigration, hence the name Immigration, CU Champaign-Urbana. So up to there it's really good, and then forum at the time, that's what it was. It would be a regular monthly forum where people from immigration backgrounds would get together and talk about what they did. But as we changed and became more of a group that does things as opposed to just talking about doing things, the name didn't exactly fit as well, but we couldn't come up with a consensus as to what to change it to. So it ended up staying that way because people knew us as that, and we were all used to using it. I think for no other reason than that. It was just people had heard of it, and we had sort of a reputation amongst people that, like, this was a group that we were familiar with, and so we were used to using it, and we said, okay, let's just keep it. But yes, you're right. If you hear the name for the first time, I think it could be confusing as to what it is.
Yes, I had no idea that this was the beginning of the Immigration Forum. That people thought it was good idea to exchange views on different kinds of grassroots activities concerning immigrants. So at the beginning, it's just people meeting together and exchange information, and then they developed a more specific purpose.
Yeah. And that's one reason I supposedly call the UPTV show CU Immigration, and we leave the word forum out. Actually, let me pause for a moment in this conversation and explain to the radio audience who might be listening to this at this moment that CU Immigration has changed over time. It has been a while since we did it this way over the summer. Guests tend to disappear and go on vacation, and we have less guests. So it's sort of a return to the radio-only version of it. I'm starting up the UPT version again. I should explain what we do. The way we do it is we film the radio show as it's taking place, or in this instance, we're talking via Skype from Japan to Illinois, and we're filming that. So that's a slightly different version of how we do it. But one way or the other, we film the show as it's happening, and then that becomes the TV show and the radio show. And so halfway through the show, we're going to come to a stopping point and then just start up again, and that will, because the TV show is only a half hour and radio show is 2 hours. So you're getting live TV now. Right now what the TV audience is not going to get until I think Friday night or something like that, and then they'll actually see it. So they get to see something you don't, but you get to hear something live that they don't, because they don't get it until the end of the week. Anyway, that's what's going on. That's what's happening to it. So CU Immigration is now a TV show and a radio show. Okay, sorry, back to our discussion.
Yes, I see. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think sometimes that people don't follow everything along. That's one thing that we also have had trouble with at CU Immigration meetings, is that we have new members come in and they'll just sit there and they won't have any idea what we're talking about, because we have all been together since the beginning and we've all worked on these same projects, so we know where we're at, and we start up in the middle every time. So every meeting is like, okay, so what's going on with this? And somebody starts talking about this or that project, and the new person is just sitting there going, I don't know any of these names, I don't know what this project is about, I'm not even sure what's in reference to, and I don't know what I'm doing here. So it's incumbent upon me as the person that runs these meetings to try to keep that in mind, so when new people are there, to explain it to them. And it's good for me to remember, for my own purposes, that that needs to happen occasionally on the show as well, because the listener to the radio, for example, might just be somebody driving by right now, and they don't know who CU Immigration is, they don't know who I am, and they don't know anything about this. And if I speak about it as if we are all old friends and we've done it for years, it's just going to go right over their heads. So I try to remember to remind everyone what it is and what's going on. So, okay, so CU Immigration, let's see, how can I explain this? It was a grassroots group that began as people who were working on immigration, or working with immigrants, or both, getting together and exchanging information about what they were doing. And then out of that came this group. The radio show came out of a desire to expand our ability to explain what we were up to and share information with a wider audience. And the TV show was the same. So now we've combined the TV show and the radio show into a single activity, since it was too hard to have two different people getting guests and doing interviews and talking about things. It was just, we were duplicating efforts. And so we just turned it into a single thing, but that's what's going on. And so if you're listening to the show for the first time and have never heard it, that's what you're listening to, is a show about a group and about a topic. We sometimes talk about the group, sometimes the topic, sometimes both, and that's what we're doing right now. And our charming guest is here from Japan and is studying grassroots movements and the use of media in grassroots movements. So that is exactly the topic here. That's generally what we're going to talk about, or how we're going to discuss this topic tonight. It's to talk about it like that. Does that sound like it explains it? Would you know what we were doing now, or if you...
Yes.
Okay, good.
And the radio show, sometimes people are driving and catch the show by chance on radio. Oh, what is this? So a person who was not so interested in immigrant issues by chance listened to radio and is more interested to realize something. TV show is on YouTube or sometimes online.
Yeah, we're on YouTube as well. I put these episodes. I think Urbana Public TV, or UPTV, who broadcast this show, I believe I believe they put them on a line as well, but I think they have their own site that they do it from. Anyway, but I upload these onto YouTube under CU Immigration, and there are a number of episodes that you can watch if you go find that channel. You can usually just see the back of my head from many different angles, so this is a little different here because you can actually look at my face. But even here we don't have very good lighting. So eventually in the studio I hope to get a piece of fabric to cover the window that on the side there, because the camera is usually over here shooting that way, and then the window is really bright, and so we're all like silhouettes in front of it and everything, and it's very grainy and it's not very good. And this version, there's just not enough light in the room to light it up. So one way or the other, we're going to improve the look of this. I don't know. Anyway, go on.
Yes, more people can see it. And who may be listening radio?
Well, I occasionally have children who come up when we're in the studio and stand right up next to the window. And the weirdest thing, this probably hasn't happened to you, but it's happened to me on a number of occasions. Someone will come up to the window and try to say something to me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now, I've never been good at lip reading, so when somebody just, mouths words from across the room, I can't tell what they're saying. I don't even have a clue. Like some people can go, oh, well, your dog is what? And they'll get enough of it to, I don't know, they'll understand it, but I can't. I can't at all. So anyway, they'll come up and they'll sit there and they're very emphatic about it. I just shrug my shoulders and I don't know what to tell them. I have no idea what you're saying. I mean, I can't even guess what you're saying. So it's a very strange moment for me. I used to try to go out and say something to them, but now I just try to ignore it because I don't know. It could be the building is on fire, or do you know what time the post office opens?
Wow.
Or I'm a crazy person and Martians have landed in my head. I mean, I just don't know what they're saying. I can't even get.
Yes. It is a good example. My question is that something you radio and TV and online, you can give some information to people through media, but you cannot touch. There is a window. You say something, people say, hello, how do you make direct, and my question is, how do you make direct contact with people? That is a community activity, but not easy to contact with community or more persons.
Yeah, it's very hard actually. It's very hard indeed. For example, one of the activities we have been involved in over our period of being together was offering training on how to fill out the applications for the Deferred Action Program. That's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, otherwise known as DACA. A lot of the consistent problems that we were aware of that immigrant people tend to have are navigating legal avenues. Well, avenues may be the wrong word. Legal documents, legal situations of any sort. So anything from, well, for example, well, this is a couple years ago. A friend called me and said that someone she worked with was an immigrant person, got a letter from the school where their child was in school, and all that they could make out, they speak some English, maybe as well as you do, that level, but all they really could understand from this document, because of the way it was written, was that if they didn't do something which they couldn't understand they were supposed to do, the school was going to take their child away from them. That's what they got out of it, and they were panicking. They were like, they can't do this, can they? What can we do? Do we have to take our kid out of school? Do we have to hide? What are we supposed to do? So I had them send the documents to me, and I read it, and it was just something about vaccinations, like if your child needs to be vaccinated in the following illnesses for the coming school year. And I think the closest thing it said to taking your child away was something along the lines of, if they're not vaccinated by such and such a date, they'll not be allowed to attend school until they are, or something like that. It was a fairly benign document. It wasn't really any big deal, but what they got out of it was this dire warning emergency thing, and they spent a sleepless night or two until I got a hold of it and could read it and tell them, and worrying about this because they thought this was something really important. So it's that kind of thing. There are kinds of very small things that grow into big things if nothing is done about them. Like they could have also just looked at those and gone, I don't know what this is, and thrown it away. Then a month later or 2 months later, their child is sent home from school and like, I'm sorry, I can't attend school anymore because I don't know why.
Oh, it means you didn't register or anything like that?
Yes. And then they're like, well, wait, my child gets kicked out of school? You're kicking my child out of school? He didn't do anything wrong. What's going on here? So there are a lot of different ways that people deal with these kinds of things, and most of them turn out badly unless they figure out some way of finding a person that they trust who can explain things to them. So those are the interesting, well, like the kinds of things that we do a lot of in a very small way. All of us did on our own before we got together and kind of came up with. For example, now we have something called La Linea, which is a call-in line, a number that you can call and get information in your language that answers those kind of questions. It's not like up to individuals, it's an actual thing, and it's sponsored by CU Immigration Forum and Latino Partnership here in town. So a number of groups sponsor it and actually pay for it and make it happen. Before that, it was just friends. You just turned to a friend and you hoped that your friend knew more than you did about it, and that's how you got information on how to understand these things. Anyway, that's what the whole DACA preparation thing was about. Was we knew that people had problems with reading forms of this sort, because if you had read those kinds of forms, you know that they're not written in the most accessible language, even to speakers of that language. Like any government forms, they are very dense and opaque for the readers.
Yeah, for me, it's difficult to read.
Yeah. Well, it's a way of writing that you have to understand in order to get anywhere with it, even if you speak the language. Much less if you sort of speak the language and or don't know the customs or culture very well. Then it's impossible to understand for people. For something as important as DACA, we felt that we should offer training courses, and that's what we put together, where we would sit down and say, here's what each of these things mean. Here's how you fill it out. Here's what they're asking here. This is what they want. This is what they don't want. They don't need this. They do want this. That kind of thing. And it was very helpful to people. Very helpful. They got a lot out of it. Since this was an important document that people were concerned about, we felt that that was a good thing, but that was the kind of thing that we would do.
Well, sometimes you give training to some volunteer for DACA, and also you go to community to have some workshop on DACA, and people could come.
Yeah. I guess that was the beginning of, well, that was your question, was how do we contact with actual people?
Yeah.
Those workshops, obviously, in order for them to be useful, we have to make it known to people that we're offering them. So we tried a number of different ways, and some of them worked and some didn't. We would go to communities, for example, that we knew, like the trailer park, Shadowwood over here and Ivanhoe over in Urbana. These are trailer parks that were mostly, not mostly, but a large percentage of people from the community that would be interested in this program, and that's where they were living. So we put up flyers. We would, well, word of mouth, like tell everybody that this was happening. And even then, with all of that, there would be times when we'd go out there to a place and sit and no one would come. They just didn't show up. Was it because they weren't interested? No, it was because they either didn't hear about it or they couldn't come at that time. There was no way to communicate that fact to us, so they just didn't come. There was a lot of trial and error in figuring out when to have these things, where to have these things. Towards the end of offering them, we finally, how did we do it? Well, we ended up picking a public space, a community center, usually like the Civic Center in Urbana or the Champaign Library, some place that everybody knew where it was, a central place. Then we would advertise it for a long time with flyers, rather than try to do it quickly, like, oh, this weekend we're going to be here. It would be like we would advertise it for a lot. Like we'd talk to everybody and found out what kinds of hours were good for them. We'd have people call and sign up, things like that. So over time we learned how to connect with people, but it was very difficult.
Yes, you can make flyer, but it's difficult to get flyer to people.
Yeah, where do you put it?
Yeah, and yes, even when you use many different kinds of media, it's really not easy.
Yeah, I think that right there is the genesis of the use of media by grassroots organizations, is that you quickly find out after you get past your circle of people that you know, your friends and neighbors who are interested in this thing, how do you tell anybody else about what you're doing? You have to advertise somehow. If you buy ads, you have to have money. If you don't buy ads, you have to invent a way of creating something that spreads that message that would be successful. That's within your means. It's within your ability to do. So something like this. I pay yearly membership dues to WRFU for the ability to have a radio show. And that's affordable. I can do that. I don't remember if I paid. I'm sure I did. Well, I don't know. Anyway, I'm pretty sure it's in the winter, right? Anyway, I don't know. But anyway, you pay yearly dues, and that's how you get a show. That's how you have the ability to do the show. And then because of that, I can reach however many people happen to hear the show. And on that note, I should say that we are finishing part 1 of our UPTV, and we will shortly begin part 2. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. And here we pretend that this actually time is going by, and that a new show is starting. And so then I say, good evening and welcome to CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana, 104.5 FM, and UPTV. Hello, UPTV. In case you didn't know, WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. I could also tell you that the views expressed are those of the speakers, and they are not intended to represent WRFU, UCIMC, or the Urbana Socialist Forum, or UPTV. Anyway, welcome. My guest for this evening,
Mugiko again.
it's Mugiko again. So, okay, we were talking about grassroots activity and the use of media last week, the last time we were on.
Yes. Last time you said it is not easy to find people who need the information. You were trying to share it, even though you can use many different type of media. And here it is another question: how do you find volunteers? You are very close to the university. Are there many students involved in your activities?
Well, fortunately, the more you do, the more people have heard of you, and the more people can look for you and find you. That's helpful. We've been together for long enough now that people actually try to find us, and that's one way. Word of mouth is another, just people talking to people, and then on top of that, we just, I don't know. For example, last weekend, well, now it's what, 2 weekends ago? 2 weekends, I think, anyway, a while ago, Quad Day at the university. And Quad Day, for those who don't know, where the quadrangle behind the Atlantean Union is filled with rows of booths from groups who are interested in attracting the attention of students. And it's anything from religious groups wanting you to join their church to, well, we had clubs right next to us. On one side was a 3D modeling club, and they work with making 3D models, 3D printing. I don't know if you noticed, but they had all these plastic things on their table, and they were experimenting with making things using this new 3D printing technology. So it's things like that. Language clubs, music clubs, dance clubs, art clubs, everything is out there. So for the last few years, we've set up the CU Immigration table, and I sit there with signs that say CU Immigration, and people come, and inevitably they say, well, what do you do? What is this? Because it's not really obvious, and it's hard for us to kind of explain it. My early explanations were vague and long and convoluted, but what I ended up with saying was, CU Immigration Forum is a group of community students and academic people who are interested in making the Champaign-Urbana area more immigrant-friendly. And to that end, we create activities and sponsor events that help immigrant people connect with services that they need. That was my explanation. I know there's more that could be said, but I felt like this kind of captured or encapsulated what we do in a pretty succinct way. It's like we are a group, we do things and try to help immigrants. So the kinds of things, the next question would inevitably be like, well, what kinds of things do you do? And then I would say, well, we sponsor. We're doing a fundraising right now for unaccompanied minors coming from Central America who need legal help and are just basically and assistance navigating the system and trying to make claims for asylum. We offer workshops for things like DACA and the driver's license stuff to help people get connected and things like that. So just different ways. They change all the time depending on what's needed at the moment. We form subgroups. They get together and work on these various projects and come up with something we can do with our limited means and manpower to address that situation.
Yes, I also went to the court day on August 23rd. So, were the students interested in your immigrant forum? There were more freshmen present on that day.
I think it was mostly freshmen. Although I would say a lot of the people that came up were sophomores and seniors and things like that.
Yeah, more international students came, or more Americans. How does it seem to you?
Well, let's see. I would say it was mostly first and second generation people who were immigrants or children of immigrants. A few international students who weren't sure what we did and thought maybe we offered assistance to international students. A guy came up and was interested in getting like kind of a work visa thing. He didn't want to be an immigrant, he just wanted to stay and work for a while. And I tried to help him with that, but really that's not what we do. We're more for immigrants, people who have come here to live. And then a few people were just Americans who were sort of just generally interested in the topic or interested in finding some sort of social service kind of activity, some social welfare activity that they could become involved in. But the majority of people that came up were either first or second generation immigrants who were interested in helping others or seeking help, or one of those two things.
In Japan, students usually don't have much contact with immigrants, so they are not so interested in the immigrant issue. It doesn't have anything to do with me. It is difficult in US. There are more international students and more immigrants here, so I thought maybe there would be more students and younger people interested in the immigrant issue.
Well, yeah. Clearly most people that were there just walked by and maybe didn't glance or didn't even bother to look over. So by far and away the vast majority of people that were there didn't see us or talk to us at all. But I would say that in the US the whole topic of immigration, the whole history of immigration is very different than from most of what you might call old world countries, like countries that have been in existence for thousands of years instead of hundreds of years. Because in those places it's kind of a strange arm's length thing, like we're this country, generations of us have been here, and immigrants are somebody new that we're not quite sure about. That sort of general feeling. But you know, you might like them to some extent, you might need them to some extent, but you're not really sure that you want to mess with this thing because for generations you've, you know, been the same, and it seems like it should always stay the same. But U.S. is a completely different story. There are people who adopt that kind of attitude, that kind of negative attitude. But for the most part, I think people are aware, or at least conscious to some degree, of the fact that except for the indigenous Americans, everybody here is an immigrant. Mostly second or maybe third, first generation, but pretty much everybody here can very quickly, in a couple of steps, trace their ancestry back to some other country. So immigration is the creation of the United States as a nation, as an entity. And it's still ongoing. It's not a fixed thing. There are people who would like to stop it where it is and fix it in place and say, okay, we're done. This is what the United States is. But it's still a formative period. It has now settled or covered all of the territory it's going to cover, and it has created sets of laws and customs and things, but it's still forming. It's still being formed. So immigration is still part of that process. As I said, I think that people are conscious of this. Maybe conscious is too strong a word. They are aware of it, whether they are conscious of it or not. So except for the most die-hard nativist nationalist types who just want to say, no, 1950, that's it, that's where we're done then. And then so anything that happens after that is new. Most people to some degree or another are aware that it's an unfinished process of formation. Who and what the United States is still an unsettled question. It's still in the process of becoming, in that sense. I think the question of immigration is different here. It's different from almost any other country I can think of because of that fact.